I'd like to start us off with a land acknowledgement, and we'd like to begin by acknowledging that we're currently in, and the data that used in this challenge is collected in Mi'kma'ki, the ancestral and unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq people. This territory is covered by the Treaties of Peace and Friendship, and we'd also like to recognize that the Indigenous peoples of all the lands that we're on today, we want to ask that everyone takes a moment to consider the territory in which they're situated and their own personal responsibility in the processes of reconciliation. So we'll just take a moment for that for you to think about. All right, thank you. And next slide, Emily, thank you. So welcome to our Ocean of Data Challenge. This is our 9th challenge, and the theme for this one is Halting the Harbor. So I'd just like to review the agenda for the evening quickly. We'll start off with some introduction to our partners that helped put this challenge together, and then we'll briefly go through some background information to the challenge. We'll hear from our speakers for our panel tonight, and then we'll go through kind of a Q&A panel discussion with them. Following that, we'll go through the challenge and then the data, and along with all the rules for the challenge, and then we'll have a short period for questions afterwards. So I'm happy to share about DeepSense first. If we'll do our partner introductions next. So Emily, if you don't mind switching to the next slide, thank you. So hi, I'm Alyssa. I'm the communication specialist at DeepSense. And DeepSense is a project based out of Dalhousie University in Halifax, Nova Scotia, but we work with universities and colleges across Atlantic Canada. We work with companies in the ocean sector who are interested in harnessing the potential of data and creating a smarter ocean economy. We connect these companies with the next generation of AI, machine learning, and data experts, aka you students. We work with companies to create a project that best suits their needs, and then we'll find a researcher and a student to help execute the project as either a master's research project, a co-op, or an internship. And we've had past projects in data analytics, data collection, data visualizations, data cleaning and processing, and of course, AI and machine learning. Projects could be anything from creating a deep learning model to track fish, or creating a prediction model for safe navigation in the Halifax Harbour, or even a computer model that can identify whale shapes from aerial images. So if that's something that interests you, then feel free to check out our website. And that's all from me. If one of our partners would like to go next, go ahead.
Should I go next? My name is Emily Fenton. I'm the manager of ShiftKey Labs. ShiftKey also works out of the Faculty of Computer Science at Dalhousie University. We are responsible for a lot of extracurricular activities for students across the province who are interested in computer science and technology. Often this looks like really intense, long weekends, like hackathons and things like that, but also one-off workshops and smaller scale talks and lectures and sort of thing. Coming up, we've got a Leet Code Jam this Thursday, and we have a Tech Innovation Bootcamp at the end of July. So if you're interested in that, please follow us on socials at ShiftKey Labs, or have a look at our website, shiftkeylabs.ca. Excited to be here tonight. Thanks for being here.
Great, I can go next, I guess. So hi, everyone. My name is Catherine Mattia. I work at COVE as the manager of workforce development. So for those of you that don't know, COVE, we're pretty much across the harbor from the pier. So we're located in Dartmouth, and we are an innovation hub for marine technology companies. So there's about 65 companies that are all creating marine technology that essentially helps us to understand what's going on in our oceans, or to monitor or manage our oceans better. So it can hit on many different markets, and some might focus specifically on aquaculture and fisheries. Some work more in the space of energy. generation and renewable energy from our oceans, and others more so within like marine defense and security. Also, there's tourism and transportation. So there's a lot of different kind of key areas that some of the companies will be working in. And essentially for the work that I do is I support the workforce side of it. So we have all these companies that are growing and building in Atlantic Canada as well as across Canada. And we need people and students just like yourselves. So we do a number of different programming to try and get students exposed and aware of all the different opportunities in the sector and recognizing all the skills that are interdisciplinary. So very much we need students in computer science and IT, just as Alyssa and Emily were mentioning they support, but we also need students in business development, marketing, engineering, and communications, finance, all the different skills. It's just like any other sector. So we basically try to work with students to recognize their role and their opportunities within the sector. And we do things like different programs within schools in elementary and high school, as well as internship programs to get students exposed to different opportunities. So if you're interested in learning more about marine technology and what are some different things that are happening within that space, definitely check out COVE on our LinkedIn or Instagram or X or any of the social medias that you might use, and you can learn more about what's going on in that space. That's a little snapshot of COVE.
That was great, Kat, and I don't have to say quite too much about workforce development over here at the PIER. I'm Sherry Scully. I work at the PIER, and the PIER is a living lab associated with Halifax Port Authority, where we solve complex problems related to marine transportation, logistics, and supply chain. And so we work with several members across this whole ecosystem. Similar to what Kat does, I'm Director of Workforce Development, and similar to what Kat does, we also conduct primary research related to workforce development across this particular industry. And Emily and Alyssa, am I going on to the next slides?
Yep, sounds good. Do you want to? Oh, perfect. Okay.
There we go. Okay, I'm just going to stop my video so you can hear. So I'm just going to give you an overview of Halifax Port Authority and the port itself and how it relates to the challenge that we're talking today about halting the harbor. Halifax Port, it is one of the deepest harbors. It's the fourth largest container port in Canada, behind Vancouver, Montreal, and Prince Rupert. And in addition to container vessels, we also receive cruise ships. And this year we're expecting around 205 ships to visit our ports. And that translates into about 350,000 passengers coming through. Slides aren't moving. There we go. Here are two maps of the harbor. And in the first one there on the left, you can see several different points of interest. We can see Point Pleasant Park there at the bottom. We have Georges Island across from where the pier is right now. You can see the ferry terminal over on the other side, on the Dartmouth side. And next to Point Pleasant Park, you can see our ocean terminal, which is the oldest set of terminals here at the port. The port itself has actually been here for over 250 years. And it was originally set up by the federal government as a way of moving, a sort of a gateway for moving people and goods. And between 1928 and 1971, we received nearly 1 million new Canadians through this area. On the right, you can see an image there of the Bedford Basin, and some of you may be familiar with BOI research area over there, where they conduct oceanographic data, and a lot of that is actually open to the public. There seems to be a delay here. There we go. In terms of the port's contribution to the economy, we contribute close to $5 billion in economic benefits and create around 25,000 jobs, and those are direct and indirect, related to the transportation, supply chain, and logistics industry. We have access here to international markets, so it's quite big, and so it really does have quite a big benefit to the regional industries. Interestingly, only about 60% of the cargo about 60% of the cargo that moves through Halifax is actually not destined for our local markets. Most of it is actually going to the higher up population areas, such as Quebec, Ontario, the US Midwest, places like Chicago and Detroit. And being an urban port, we're surrounded by quite an interesting ecosystem of social and culture and arts and entertainment and so on. I mean, that's why a lot of tourists come and visit our space here. And I want to talk a little bit about some examples of rare events. We've sort of described as rare events, and some of those are, catastrophic, or they're dangerous and challenging, and some can actually be really positive. So I want to give a few examples here. And one, of course, is related to COVID, where we saw, cruise ships not calling to port for 2 years, and we can see obviously or imagine what the economic impact of that was. Some other examples of rare events are things like algal blooms, which can have an impact on the users of the the harbor, and that includes the people and also the natural ecosystems that exist in those areas. Another example of a rare event would involve the Suez Canal, which itself isn't really a harbor, but it is a key artery for global trade. And when that ship was stuck in the canal a few years ago, it caused some real disruption to logistics and supply chain, which resulted in some inventory shortages for us. There were many things that were missing from the shelves for a little while, which in turn increased prices. A more recent rare event was the cargo container that crashed into the Baltimore Bridge. This shut down the port for roughly 2 months. And it in turn destroyed a key artery for vehicle traffic and halted vessel traffic in or out. And thankfully, no one was hurt or killed in this accident. But it did create some real disruptions to logistics and supply chains, and once again to inventory shortages. Also means that many vessels were stuck without being able to deliver their cargo. And of course, in doing so, they're also burning a lot more diesel while they're waiting. And an example of a much more positive rare event is the one that just passed in the last 2 weeks, which was SailGP, happened on May 31st. And during that time, we closed down the harbor between 2 and 6:30, and that was on the Saturday and the Sunday, which meant there's no ferries or other vessels allowed into the harbor for their safety. And you can imagine what some of the positive and also the possibly negative impacts of that are in terms of halting the harbor. And Corey Gleason, he's one of the panelists today. He's going to talk a little bit more about that and other rare events that have slowed down the harbor or brought it to a complete halt. And I'm going to pass it on from there.
Okay, so thinking about all of that kind of leads us to the broader question: what are the impacts of a rare event on the Halifax Harbour? And within this, we've got our 3 challenge streams, the first being on the harbor. And this theme takes a look at the impact of rare events on vessel traffic in the harbor. So whether that's recreational or larger cargo ships. Some of the examples you may want to think about include the impact of closing down the harbor for a few hours, like we just heard Sherry speak about with SailGP. But also how vessel traffic adapts during a weather event, like the many hurricanes that we get in our in the month of September every year. But another one you could think about are the systems in place for the vessels to communicate and how they navigate around each other safely. And our second stream is in the harbor, so thinking about the impact of rare events on the Halifax Harbour ecosystem. And yes, that can stretch up into the Bedford Basin, as a lot of our open source data does come from BIO. And some of those examples you may want to take a look at include how weather events, like the hurricanes I mentioned, affect the aquatic ecosystem beneath the water, indicators that might be used to predict how a rare event could disturb the harbor ecosystem. So maybe looking at past hurricane data and how it's impacted the harbor ecosystem, and then how we can maybe mitigate that for future weather events or other rare events as well. And then our last theme explores around the harbor. So it takes a look at the economic and social implications of a rare event in the Halifax Harbour. Some examples you may want to think about include how the community around the harbour may respond and adapt to a rare event. So maybe during SailGP, how people were traveling across the harbour because the ferries were closed down. So maybe thinking about like bridge traffic there. But you could also think about how people and goods are moving around the harbour if a bridge, ferry, or ship is disrupted. So maybe thinking about the Blue Nose Marathon, where they had the bridge closed down, how people and how goods are moving around during times like that. And more broader, you can also think about, or more broadly, you can also think about tourism around the harbor and the impacts of cruise ships on the community. And within these three streams, we've got three fantastic panelists joining us today. The first is Samira Kodadous, the CEO and founder of Safe Harbour Research and Technologies. And we've got Corey Gleason as well joining us from the Halifax Port Authority. He is the Deputy Harbour Master of Operations. And we've also got Clark Richards, a physical oceanographer at the Bedford Institute of Oceanography. So we'll start. Samira will kick off our kind of panel discussion first. She is a seasoned multidisciplinary professional with over 10 years of experience in the dynamic and diverse field of resource management across various sectors, including marine and inland ecosystems. With a strong passion for ocean and wildlife conservation, she's also an advocate for safety in both work and leisure activities. Samira has played a role in assisting private entities and government agencies on multiple projects to achieve their objectives. In her current role as CEO and founder of Safe Harbour Research and Technologies, she's committed to creating safer passages for those traveling within busy waterways and reducing the impact on our marine environment for current and future generations. And outside of work, Samira also enjoys the Halifax Harbour, and she likes paddling, swimming, and gardening. So Samira, if you want to kick us off, if you've got some slides to share, you should be able to share your screen.
Hi, thank you, Lisa, for introduction. I don't unfortunately have any slides, but I can go through a brief introduction about myself and the company. And just before that, I want to say thank you so much for having me for a panel in here. And I wanted to say to the students that are listening to this, definitely take advantage of this challenge and make sure that you apply for the challenges that's available to you, whichever one that is you are more interested in. So a little bit about myself. As Alicia mentioned, I am CEO and founder of Safe Harbour Research and Technologies. We are in a mission to create a safer passage for anybody that is traveling within the waterways by creating a technology that can assist that, and in collaboration with the ports, and especially Port of Halifax at the moment. And our goal and mission is that to expand it and beyond to create a safer passage for anybody around the world. A little bit about background in my education. I have a Bachelor of English Translation Studies, and also I have I graduated from a freshwater recreation program in BCIT. I worked a few years back in BC with the environmental consulting company on a various projects with Department of Fisheries and Oceans, with the BC Minister of Environment, collaborated with basically stakeholders, done wonderful works with the different organizations. From tagging excursions to stock assessment to environmental monitoring, environmental assessments. And I've been underwater for quite a lot of times, being on the boat, out of the boat, on the land, doing various different things. As you can imagine, my passion is wildlife and fisheries and ocean. So I did a lot of work in that environment. While I was doing that, as you imagine, when you are working, you're underwater, you can see a lot of different things. And I saw near collision accidents. I actually myself was capsized a few times while I was pulling traps from the water. And I also saw, mammal incidents with the boats. So I've seen a lot of the things in that environment, and I was always thinking like, what can I be done to create a safer environment for and protecting our environment for and protecting for people that are underwater traveling. And this was basically back in years ago, and I moved to Nova Scotia and wanted to get into the environmental sector here. And as I was moving through Nova Scotia and trying to get the feeling of how the ocean's environment is working here, unfortunately, COVID hits. And as you imagine, like when COVID hits, it was very difficult to get to any industry. And I decided to go back to school and study oceans technology program at NSCC. And graduated a few years back again. And while I was in that program, because I had this passion and wanted to do something different, and I was thinking, okay, what is a challenge? I have to create this challenge for myself to do this, because if I don't do it now, it may never happen again. And I had the opportunity to put a proposal for a research to work on the challenging with the speeding vessels in the harbor and how to reduce the basically vessels that are speeding in multi-waterways. So the project got approved, and I started the challenge. I started working on it as a researcher with NSCC and moved on to Dalhousie University. I started collaborating with the MRI Idea Hub with Dalhousie University and in collaboration with Port of Halifax, and to creating this technology that in hoping that reducing vessel speed, reducing collision, and protecting marine mammals and protecting our ecosystem. So like, as you can imagine, I've been through a lot of different things, try to like, creating sort of like understanding the collaboration, understanding the business, and put myself into that challenge, and be able to kind of learn through it and creating something meaningful. And as right now, and also we've worked with wonderful partners like DeepSense that brought students to us to help us to solve our challenges that we have with the company. So it has been wonderful, and I can say from the experience, the challenge that is put out there, it's great in a way that you as a students, you can take on and experiences and maybe creating a solution meaningful for the companies, for the industry, for the partners, and you never know where that goes. So it can turn into the business, or it can turn onto the experience that you can carry on in your career. Yeah, that's it. So that's all I can say.
Thank you, Samira. And I did forget to mention that folks in the audience, if you have any questions that come up, feel free to either pop them in the Q&A box or in the chat, and we'll get to them during our panel discussion. And next up, we will hear from Corey. Corey Gleason is a former commander. He's a retired commander for the Royal Canadian Navy, and he's presently the Deputy Harbour Master of the Halifax Port Authority. Corey is responsible for oversight and management of marine operational activities, including marine matters and cargo-related operations. And just a reminder to our speakers, Emily is controlling the slides, so you can just let her know when you want to advance to the next slide. So Corey, take it away.
Thanks very much. I don't see my slide up. There it is. Can we go to the second slide? So if you ever get the opportunity to meet me face to face, you'll know right away that I'm all about data fusion. We opened up an operations center at turning Portland 24/7 operations at the 25th of September of last year. And I want to take some time here to hopefully inspire some folks with this collaborative approach that I've got. And hopefully turn this into a pretty fun discussion afterwards. So delving into how we can leverage interdisciplinary data analysis and technological advancements to predict, mitigate, and manage the impacts of rare events on Halifax Harbour. This collaborative approach necessitates integrating environmental, economic, and social data sources alongside machine learning and strong community engagement. By working together, we can ensure the safety and well-being of the harbor, its unique ecosystem, and the surrounding community. Just stay on that slide for me, please. So several technologies are already in place to aid safe navigation during unexpected events in the Halifax Harbour. One, for instance, is the Automatic Identification System, AIS. Another, VHF radios allowing real-time communications between vessels and Harbour Authority. Additionally, there's GPS, provides crucial positioning data, and predictive analytics powered by machine learning can forecast vessel traffic patterns based on weather data and historical trends specific to Halifax Harbour. This allows for an optimized routing during disruptions, minimizing congestion and accidents within the harbour itself. However, the Harbour Authority is faced with significant challenges during emergencies. Maintaining a clear communication picture, ensuring situational awareness across all vessels navigating the harbour, and prioritizing safety become paramount. Next slide, please. So looking towards the future, autonomous vessels have the potential to mitigate traffic disruptions within Halifax Harbour. These vessels could be pre-programmed to navigate specific routes during emergencies, reducing reliance on human decision-making in critical situations. And furthermore, real-time data integration from AIS, weather sensors strategically placed within the harbour, and environmental monitoring systems can provide a comprehensive picture of the situation, enabling informed decision-making during harbour closures. It's also crucial to learn from the best practices of other major ports and explore innovative maritime technologies to continuously improve Halifax Harbour's response capabilities. We have a national group that we belong to, and we collaborate quite frequently with one another. Next slide, please. So rare weather events like hurricanes can significantly impact the unique ecosystem within Halifax Harbour. Storm surges can significantly disrupt the habitat, while changes in salinity levels can stress the marine life. Additionally, these events might introduce pollutants like oil spills or industrial waste in the harbour, further harming the ecosystem. To predict these disruptions specific to Halifax, we can monitor water quality and fish migration patterns within the harbour itself. These indicators can provide early warnings of potential problems. Water quality monitoring plays a vital role in understanding the event's impact on marine life within the harbour and identifying potential contamination risks. Next slide, please. Rare events can have lasting ecological consequences as well. They can disrupt fish populations, damage breeding grounds, and harm sensitive habitats. However, innovation solutions do exist. Techniques like restoring coral reef or introducing native plant species can specifically aid the recovery of Halifax Harbour's unique ecosystem. The key to long-term success lies in the community engagement. By educating the public, involving them in data collection, and offering volunteer opportunities, we can foster a sense of ownership and responsibility for the harbor's well-being. Together, we can ensure a healthy and vibrant ecosystem for future generations. Hence the reason why we're all here together today. Rare events can have a significant economical impact on the activities surrounding Halifax Harbour. Tourism, fishing industries, and port operations in our own communities can be severely affected. Therefore, it's crucial to develop business continuity plans and economic recovery strategies specific to the surrounding areas. Additionally, maintaining essential community services like healthcare and emergency response during disruptions requires a robust infrastructure and well-rehearsed contingency plans with these communities within our own. Finally, investing in resilient transportation infrastructure, such as strengthening bridges, ferries, and coastal areas surrounding Halifax Harbour can minimize disruptions caused by flooding or extreme weather events. Final slide. In conclusion, by leveraging interdisciplinary data analysis and technology advancements, we can significantly improve our ability to predict, mitigate, and manage the impacts of rare events on Halifax Harbour. However, a collaborative approach is essential. We need strong partnerships between government agencies, business operators, students like yourselves in and around the harbour, and the community, and as well the community, to ensure effective preparedness and a swift recovery process. By working together, we can safeguard the long-term health and sustainability of Halifax Harbour, ensuring a vibrant and resilient future for both the environment and surrounding communities. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Corey. Awesome. And our last speaker, Clark Richards, is a physical oceanographer who uses observations to describe processes that mix, transform, and transport seawater. His research areas range from the Arctic to the Northwest Atlantic to the Halifax Harbour, and most of his work involves the use of novel platforms and sensors to facilitate data collection. In addition to collecting data to understand the ocean, his research also focuses on testing and evaluating new sensors, especially those meant for autonomous platforms. He is currently a research scientist with Fisheries and Oceans Canada at the Bedford Institute of Oceanography, but he's previously worked in industry where he gained experience and an appreciation for the role commercial R&D plays in the advancement of science. Finally, he's also an active developer of free and open source software to facilitate scientific analysis, including the OCE and the Argo Floats packages available for the R programming language.
Thanks. Yeah. Oh, title looks a little funny on this. That's okay. So my name's Clark Richards. I, as Alyssa kind of alluded, my job is as an ocean of data kind of analyst. I feel like this challenge is sort of what I am trying to do every day. So what I wanted to do with my 5 minutes here, just to kick things off, is really give a sense of some of the data, some of the very rich data that DFO has been collecting and continues to collect in the harbor, and specifically in the Bedford Basin. This is just a picture of like me and a colleague actually deploying what's called an ocean glider off the back of one of our small boats. This boat is the Sigma T. It's the one we actually use to do our sampling in the basin. But we don't usually use gliders for that. This is more of a test thing. So next slide, please. All right, so just a bit about me. I think I don't need to spend a lot on this because Alyssa did a very good job of reading the bio that I already sent to her. But you can find more about me. I've got a webpage at clarkrichards.org. It's a bit cut off there for some reason, but I did a PhD at Dalhousie, a postdoc in Woods Hole, worked in Ottawa with a company called RBR, and since 2016, I've been here in Dartmouth at the Bedford Institute of Oceanography. Next slide. Just a bit of a preview, this is, it was mentioned, one of the big things that I've spent a lot of time on over my academic and professional career is working on free and open source software. And one of the prime examples of this, which I'll actually show some examples of, is the OCE or OS package for the R language. It's a package that allows you to do oceanographic analysis with a wide range of very common data formats, data types, and analysis sort of techniques. A similar package that builds on that released a couple of years ago called the Argo Floats package. This is specifically for working with data from Argo Floats, but we don't typically use those in the harbor because they're meant for the deep ocean, so I won't get into that one. Next slide, please. So just as a quick overview, a lot of what we do here in the DFO Maritimes region supports what's known as the Atlantic Zone Monitoring Program. You can see in that little map, this is just a screenshot of the AZMP website. It's a series of cruises on research vessels to try and take samples along a regular set of sections or lines or stations, which you can see on that map. So really, it's like a bicycle wheel. There's spokes all over the place. Our goal is that twice a year, we sample each of those lines for physical, chemical, biological properties, things like temperature, salinity, chlorophyll, nutrients, pH, all kinds of stuff. And our primary use for that is really just to monitor, what is happening in Atlantic Canada in the ocean. And that goes into our annual State of the Ocean reporting. It also gets used for all kinds of science, how things are changing, if we observe specific processes, testing of new equipment, a lot of different things. Next slide, please. So related to AZMP is a sort of parallel program, which we has come to be known as the Bedford Basin Monitoring Program, or BBMP. In a way, this is what we call Station 0 of the Halifax line, which is one of those AZMP lines. Station 0 because, of course, Halifax line started outside of the harbor, but as we started adding the basin in, it actually does show a lot of continuity in terms of the type of data and the sort of signals that we measure even out along that Halifax line outside of the harbor. Now, what's different about this one, so first of all, you can see a map of the topography or bathymetry of Bedford Basin. It's a glacial basin, sort of a fjord type estuary system. It's about 70 meters deep in that blue area right in the middle. And we sample that weekly from that small boat I showed in that first photograph. Similar measurements to the full AZMP stations. We use a CTD, which is a conductivity, temperature, and depth profiler with a rosette, all kinds of sensors. We take bottle samples. What's a bit different about the Bedford Basin, though, is it's kind of co-sampled now along with a team from Dalhousie University who sampled for a range of a whole bunch of other parameters that we typically haven't done. So biooptical parameters, dissolved carbon dioxide, eDNA, bacteria, all kinds of different things. And as was mentioned, as with anything in theory that comes from the federal government, this data is free and freely available. Next slide, please. So just a quick snapshot of what BBMP looks like. Here you can see a screenshot of the website, which I have put the URL there, but you can just Google Bedford Basin Monitoring Program. It should bring you to this. This is showing the recent conditions. So if you look at this plot on the right, it's showing things like profiles. So this is, in oceanographic terminology, this is a measurement of water properties measured from the surface or at zero pressure or zero depth, all the way down to the bottom. So on the y-axis on these plots is essentially the depth in the basin. You can see it goes down to 70 meters. And then the x-axis show the values of those properties. So red here is temperature. It's warm at the surface, cold at the bottom. Salinity is the opposite. It's fresh at the surface and salty at the bottom. And there's other parameters on here too, such as chlorophyll, oxygen, density, all of that. But this is just right off of the BBMP website, where you can also go and get that data. So it's distributed in two formats, what we call ODF. Those are ocean data format files, just a text file, or as CSVs. And as it turns out, the OCE package can read those ODFs directly with no futzing around. So a bit of a plug there. Next slide, please. Now, going out once and taking one profile is pretty interesting. And to be honest, I look every week to see what the conditions look like. But where you really get to see a story, where the data reveals things that are going on, is where you take those profiles and you kind of stack them up. So these are some plots, again, just from the BBMP website, showing temperature and salinity and density. Those are on the left-hand column through time. So this goes back to January of 2022. And it's basically turned those vertical profiles into a mapped image that has depth on the y-axis, time on the x-axis, and then the color there represents the property. So you can see in the summertime, obviously the surface waters are a lot warmer, but also fresher, and therefore less dense. And the column on the right is what we call an anomaly from the climatology. So the climatology means like the long-term average, and we can actually compare the data that we get against that long-term average to get a sense of how things are changing. The reds mean positive change, the blue means negative change for those properties. And just advance the slide one more, please. Just as an example of some extreme events, some of you may have noticed there's when you look at the salinity in July of 2023, there's a really intense blue blob near the surface, very, very low salinities. And some of you may remember, if you were around during that time, there was a huge rain event at the end of July that caused extreme flooding. It caused the Sackville River, which is the main river that flows into the basin, to overflow its banks in all kinds of spots. But in fact, if you look at this data, what this data reveals is that it actually sets up a pattern of a fresh anomaly in the basin that persists for months, actually. There's, if you look at the anomalies, that blue anomaly continues right into winter until it finally gets erased by some physical processes. Next slide, please. I would be remiss if I didn't mention some of the other amazing, super interesting oceanographic data that's collected by us in the basin, and that is the water level data that's collected by the Canadian Hydrographic Service. So they are measuring water actually right at the pier at the end at BIO, as well as a couple other places around the harbor. And that data shows all kinds of variability, all kinds of processes. Primarily, if you look at just the raw data, the first thing you see are tides. There's a snapshot here from the website where you can grab that data. They provide the elevation data as well as some tidal predictions, which you can use to then look at all the things that aren't tides. Next slide, please. And as a good example of that, we're talking about extreme events, and so everyone's mentioned hurricanes. I thought I would show just a really quick example of what that kind of data looks like under an extreme event. So Hurricane Juan, she's 21 years ago now, but was one of the biggest hurricanes to ever make landfall in this area, at least since the 1800s. It landed as a Category 2, sustained winds of 160 kilometers per hour. It actually killed 8 people in the region. Huge amounts of damage. But what was, was oceanographically interesting about this is that the intense low pressure of that storm actually corresponded with not just a high tide, but also what we call a higher high tide, which really compounded the water levels in storm surge and therefore made the waves that much worse. And you can see in this photo, one of the ships that was actually down along the harbor was swamped and sank right as it was tied up there. Next slide, please. Now, I won't go into details on this, but this is just a really quick example of how you can use some of this data, and in fact, how you can use my package, the OCE package, which includes, by no coincidence, the sea level example. There's an example data set for sea levels, which in fact is Halifax Harbour sea level data, which there's a little code chunk here. It's really not much to this. To make that plot that's on the right, where you can see the black line is the water elevation. You can clearly see when the hurricane came through, and that came through, at not just a high tide, but as I said, a higher high tide, right? So this is what we call spring neap tides. The spring tides tend to be higher than the neap ones, and that's when the hurricane hit. And so if you actually remove the tides and look at just the storm surge, that's the red line in that plot. There's about 1.5 meters of storm surge associated just with that storm. And that was added on top of the tides. And then when you get waves on that, it can go even higher and cause a lot more damage. So next slide. I think that's it for me. Just a sort of final photo to wrap up of how we often collect data from ships. That's an example of the sort of CTD rosette that we typically use, not just in the deep sea, but also in places like the harbor. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Clark. That last example is a great one for students to kind of get started with. If they're not sure where to start or what kind of things they want to look at. So I think with thinking about that and all kinds of data, we'll get started with our panel discussion. So I've got kind of like a first more general question to get us started. What do you think are some of the most valuable data sources for understanding the comprehensive impacts of rare events on the harbor?
I feel like I just gave my vote.
Yes. Yeah.
I could give my presentation again, but I'll leave it.
Yeah, Clark, you really did nail that one. I think some of the other sensors, the obvious ones, are AIS, GPS, VHF radio, radar, imaging. Those types of things are really quite important to piece the information together. And of course, the other sources that are provided through other federal government departments and Transport Canada.
I think I can add a couple of things. So I think port operations data is also could be very important. Historical data, real-time monitoring, as Corey mentioned, right? Satellite imagery, having a environmental monitoring data, either the past and future, that will also assist in understanding the comprehensive impact of those rare events. Geospatial data is also very, as Corey mentioned, including GIS map, coastal, erosion models, and bathymetry surveys and land use maps. These all can help to understand, how that basically these valuable resources can help to see that impacts of rare events. And I think also community feedbacks and surveys. Those are I believe is important. Feedback from harbor stakeholders, ports and companies, shipping company, businesses that are out there, public. Those are really important, because the people that they see some stuff that they can actually report, and that's just based on experience. you know, if you're on the harbor and you come across and some information that you might, you know, might not be at that point the stakeholder that sees it, but if it's received by the public, that can be included into that sort of data analysis and using as a resources to find out how we can reduce the impact of rare events on the harbor.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that kind of like anecdotal evidence piece plays a really important role. But I'm kind of curious what everyone thinks about the role that community data and that citizen science plays in predicting these impacts and understanding the impacts of a rare event on the harbor.
I'll maybe jump in there. I mean, I don't know that there is a lot of community citizen science on the harbor right now. I do know that around Halifax, there are a number of groups doing similar things on lakes, which is actually a nice model. It would be really interesting to see that expand to the harbor. And I speak from experience because I'm actually involved. We have a lake in my neighborhood, and we have a community group that goes out twice a week and measures the same properties I do for my job, but in a lake. So for me, it's an easy sell because I just get to do more of the stuff that I love. But I think it would be pretty interesting and pretty beneficial to have sort of, you know, a much better distributed network of data sources for the harbor. And this relates a little bit to one of the questions I just answered in the chat about whether the data is collected through space and time. And the answer is, well, we collect it as regularly in time as we can. But, you know, it's a lot of effort for us. We just go to one place and we do it over and over and over and over again because we can do that really well. But we kind of rely on others if there's more data to collect to try and fill those other maybe spatial gaps.
Yeah, I do find it interesting that people that live around their lakes love their lakes, but there are folks that, well, you know, the Northwest Arm gets a lot of attention. The folks that live on the Northwest Arm are really bought into the Northwest Arm, and Samira knows that very well. We're looking at one of her projects that she's working on to see whether or not we can employ it in the Northwest Arm. The port itself has a program referred to as One Port City. We have an annual event every year where we have folks come out and we communicate the initiatives of the port. I think this time it's the 15th of June, I think, this year. And I do invite all you folks to come out and participate. It's a fun event. But the only way we're going to really kind of get this, like a community engagement like that going is by doing these types of events. You know, sharing here with students and engaging folks in the community to participate in their port and really kind of, you know, generate a sense of ownership.
I think Corey and Clark said enough for now, but I just want to mention also a couple of things. So I think one of the I guess important thing that we can look into is sort of localized knowledge and crowdsourced mapping. That's something I believe it can be included as you engaging the community, right? So local residents, as you know, Corey mentioned, right? For example, Northwest Arm people that are very vigilant, they can see everything, right? So fishermen businesses that all have knowledge and observation, and I think that if there is a official data source that they can tap into and put their basically knowledge and information, then that can bring it in because they're involved, right? They're involved into that community and they say, okay, I have a voice into saying that, and it can be shared with the public to be able and to the also stakeholder to see that, because those are the ones that they're on there all the time. They're living in by our shorelines and they can see the ones on the lake, they live by the lakes, right? The crowdsourced mapping, I think, is something that I always thought about it. This is something that a student can actually listen to this, right? Like crowdsourced platform on mobile app that enables the community to kind of contribute into the spatial data, photographs, observation of the harbor, something like that, that actually can put it out there, and that can be shared against the public. That is again an engagement of the public, and that can really help to expand that data contribution and also to be able to hopefully create a better understanding of the real events and the impacts of the harbor.
Awesome, thanks. I'm just keeping an eye on our Q&A box over here. It looks like, thank you, Clark, for also keeping an eye on the Q&A box and tackling some of those questions. But we've got another one here. For Corey, how long do contracting other organizations for certain rare events take for the HPA? Though I understand this is a very situation dependent question, but for events that HPA does not have capability of, does it take hours, days to contract a private company or another government organization like CCG? Not quite sure what CCG is, but I'm hoping
Canadian Coast Guard.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah, it doesn't take very long at all. There's resources that work the harbor quite frequently. We have service level agreements with different users, we're talking, if the resource is available and they're not already doing something else, we can get somebody out on a job pretty rapidly within an hour or so.
Awesome. And kind of thinking about that, like on the harbor aspect, the vessel traffic. This is a question for everyone, but how can predictive analytics be used to forecast vessel traffic patterns during these rare events that we have?
I can talk about it, but I feel that Corey can actually answer this very well too. But I believe that there's a few avenues you can go with, like, historical data analysis and using, machine learning and real-time data integration. That will give the better understanding of, the risk and what is happening, and be able to create a risk assessment and mitigations for it. I believe that it's important that if you have this, the historical data that prior to, and current data, you can create a model that basically through this machine AI learning to provide, creating a network to make these predictions. And put these parameters, like let's say weather forecast, right? We Clark talked about, the huge storm too, and those kind of things can be included. You can also bring the historical traffic data into it, and those can be merged, and having as basically one algorithm for all of that, it can start training that model to be able to see all the events and actually see that in predicted as it comes through. So I guess I can say the historical data analysis and the current data and integrating those can create creating a model can help in that perspective.
Let's jump on board there for a second and just say that some of the challenges of the Halifax Harbour, and Sherry Scully actually said it at the front end of the meeting here, that we're exposed to the ocean right away. And that's pretty unique. Vancouver doesn't experience that. Montreal doesn't experience that. But when, as soon as we get out of the approaches, we're out in the middle of the ocean. And the problem with that is that as the vessels get larger, the ability to bring those ships in or escort them out requires different processes. And we have to make these tugs up to these larger vessels further out of the harbor. So based on some of the things that Samira said, if you can appreciate that you have a limitation, we'll just put a marker on there. We'll say 2.5 meters, just for the sake of saying that. that's the limit. If we say 2.5 meters is the limit, you take a look at your historical data and your current data, and you can actually use tools like that to determine when the impact's going to be, speed ships up or slow ships down, and reduce the impact of a rare event in such a way that we can get the cargo moving or slow it down, have work stop at a very specific time. And we did some of this work last year when we had the 2 hurricanes, where we were able to kind of collect a whole bunch of pieces of information, put it together, and we were able to kind of narrow it down to about 4 hours, where we could say, yeah, we're going to have to stop work in this 4-hour window, wait for the storm to pass, and then 12 hours later we can pick it back up again and get things going. And what that did, that work kind of translated out by pushing information out to ships that were calling on the port of Halifax to slow down. You're not going to make it. Using AIS data, understanding where the other vessels were and things like that, and communicating with them. And some ships were able to get in really quickly, get the work done, and then get them back out of the harbor and carry on. So that's really impactful stuff if you can get your harness that information and that data in a usable sense.
It's really impressive and kind of blows my mind how quickly kind of things can be rerouted and things can be changed to anticipate certain like weather events and certain events that you may not have a lot of warning about, but have some warning about. That's really, yeah, very impressive. But also I'm interested in the potential environmental impacts that the rerouting the traffic, vessel traffic, might have on the harbor. So kind of thinking about like the under the water impacts of rerouting the traffic.
I don't think I understand what you mean. Reroute the traffic away from Halifax Harbour for a positive impact on the port?
Yeah, kind of, and thinking about like how it impacts the environment under the water. Like if we need to say there's a hurricane and there's more ships coming into port, how maybe the extra emissions are impacting the life beneath the water.
Yeah, so if the storm's significant enough, we will not keep ships alongside. It's really unfortunate for the sailor, but we have to tell the sailor to leave because we have to protect our own infrastructure. The cope walls and things like that can't take a large ship from interacting with the side of the alongside positions. So and going to anchor is probably not the choice of a position for a master, because their vessels will drag in high winds, and they don't want to drag. And there's a limited amount of tugs in the harbor. And so if we have any upwards of 5 to 6 ships that are at anchor in Bedford Basin and they're all dragging, we don't have enough tugs to go out there and help them. So the best place for them to be is to the outside of the harbor, and in a safe quadrant where they ride the low pressure system out and then come back in to do your work. So our first go-to is pack it up. You got to get out of Halifax Harbour.
Interesting. We've got a question from Emily in the audience, and she's asking, how do rare events impact your jobs? When things get closed down or there's a big change, how does it disrupt your ability to do your job? So I think this is kind of for everyone too.
I'll go first. You guys are hearing a lot of me. Smarter people in the conversation than me. For me, it requires us to actually be at the port. We need to be boots on the ground. We'll open up an emergency coordination center. We'll have a few key people that will be on a rotation for a 24-hour period or longer. And we actually stay at the Westin across the street on rotation. And so too, it's not just the operations staff, but we have maintenance staff, a whole host of folks that are on standby, waiting for doing, first of all, preparation work to lock the port down, and then take cover, and then come back and take a look at what the status of the port is, and see how quickly we can open business back up to get the supply chain going again.
Lisa, I think I can answer this question in terms of like, if I'm for the technology part of it. And as a company, when the rare event happens, and let's say if the technology is deployed, there obviously going to be a sort of backlog, like to figure out, okay, what do we need to do now to get, if the technology needs to stay, let's say, on, inside the harbor, then we have to think about how to get to it to make sure it stands the rare event. If it's not, how do we get it out of it? And doing that it requires kind of saying, okay, so it might impact even to access to sort of your work and your logistics and communications even. So yes, the rare event can cause a disruption in when you're trying to deploy and maintaining ocean technology equipments and things like that. In company point of view is you have to make a good calls and make a decision to get in and out as fast as possible, right? And make sure your assets are stays in good conditions, right? Going back to, just wanted to mention very, very quick things in terms of like the environmental impact on when you mentioned about rerouting the vessel traffic. And I believe, based on my experiences and I've done a bunch of environmental assessments and things like that, and I feel like most the disruption from the environmental perspective would be marine ecosystem. So the disruption, it can cause a habitat disrupt. I believe the clock might be also answering that as well. So it's caused basically a disrupting in marine ecosystem habitat. Increase of that traffic vessels, it can actually cause a problem in degradation or disturbance of marine life as you're rerouting, and potential introduction of even invasive species where it wasn't supposed to be. And this is the other part that I can say is noise pollution. The rerouting through alternative routes or ports may increase the noise pollution in marine environment, and that can affect any mammals, fish, or other species that basically rely on a sound for communications and navigations or feeding even. I believe these kind of excessive noise, it can disrupt the behavior patterns and interfere with their, let's say, reproductive cycles, cause, psychological stress in marine mammals, right? And because they used to see that, they know where they're going through routing and rerouting the vessels, it can actually cause that disruptions of their communications, and they're causing a psychological issue. These are just based on an experience, but there could be a lot of different things. Environment is very, we don't know until we actually getting those data information from it.
Thank you. Sorry, I'm just keeping an eye on our Q&A box as well. But I was also kind of thinking about the environmental impacts as well. And Clark, this might be a question for you, but what kind of role does water quality monitoring play in understanding the impacts of the rare events on the harbor ecosystem? So I know you talked a bit about tides, but what about in terms of like pH or like dissolved oxygen and those kinds of things, and understanding the impacts of those rare events?
Yeah, no, it's a good question. I mean, I think it plays a primary role because we can't actually know we've had a rare event under the water unless we've measured it, right? Like, this is the problem with the ocean, is there's so friggin' much of it, and it's dark and it's far away, and the only way you can know what's happening is to either like literally lower a bottle and take a sample of water that you can measure in a lab, or have a sensor that can measure something relevant enough to be able to understand that. So, this is one of the big reasons why, an organization like DFO puts so much emphasis on just repeat measurement, monitoring, just do it over and over again. It doesn't matter if we know there's something that's going to happen. We need a baseline so we know what the change was when it happened. You can't go out once and measure something and say, oh, E. coli is high. There must be a big event, because if you didn't measure E. coli beforehand, you don't know if it was high. And I can tell you E. coli was high in the harbor for a long time. So yeah, I think, water quality, it also covers a broad range of things, right? Like I just mentioned E. coli. I don't really know much about E. coli, except that it mostly comes from poop. But there's a lot of things that also, sorry, I said poop online. It also influences, what happens, right? E. coli and other, bacteria won't bloom in conditions that aren't favorable. So we also need to measure just what the conditions are in order to understand, how an event might come to pass, or whether one is currently underway, or what conditions might lead to one happening at some point. Does that make sense?
Yes, absolutely. That makes a lot of sense. Thank you. Okay, I think we'll wrap up with maybe one last question. I'll give our audience. Oh, we've got one more before we'll kind of wrap up with a big one. But Joy's asking how rare events can affect marine animals, kind of broadly, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I think it depends on the event. It depends on the animal. I think, one of the ones that's garnered a lot of attention recently, and this isn't just Halifax Harbour, but much of the ocean is seeing increasing deoxygenation, right? So this is a process by which increased productivity in the ocean, so that means like more phytoplankton blooms, consuming more nutrients. When those blooms actually finish, a lot of that organic material sinks down in the water. It's dead bugs and fecal pellets and things. See, I can say poop in other ways. And it gets consumed. And when it gets consumed, it's just like us. Those things have to breathe oxygen, and they use the oxygen that's in the water. And that's really bad for anything else that needs oxygen. So fish or, benthic organisms. And this is becoming an increasing problem in the basin. So one of the parameters we monitor is oxygen. It's typically refreshed in a system like the basin, maybe once, twice, or 3 times a year. But it's not as obvious that it's going to happen when it does, because if you looked at that, the bathymetry that I showed, Bedford Basin is 70 meters deep. The narrowest, or the shallowest, point to get into there, which is through the Narrows, is about 22 meters. So you've got to get water up over that 22-meter sill, we call it, where it can then, get down into Bedford Basin. And it doesn't always do that. It's actually oceanographically kind of hard to get high oxygen water over that hill and into the basin. So that's one example.
Sounds to me like you just created a project.
Trust me, I know 8 people working on that problem right now, including me.
Thanks for sharing that example. I'm sure there's lots of other examples. And sorry, Samira, I'll let you talk. Sorry.
Oh, no. I was just saying, like, yeah, there's a lot of it depends on what event it is, right? I mean, we're talking marine mammals, unpredictable. We don't know exactly where they're traveling to, and we don't know exactly where the routes are. When I say exactly, there are a lot of sensing data and things like that we have deployed, and we can kind of see where they potentially might be. But they're marine mammals, they're unpredictable. From my experience, I would say one of the things that can cause a problem is, if there are, from what we're doing right now, we're trying to create, reducing the speed of the vessels. Let's say if there is a collision happens, right? Because somebody is speeding, and that is it's not a rare event, but it is an event. And through that, there might be Coast Guard coming in, there might be police coming in, there might be different kinds. So as these are approaching and is causing these speeds, they can cause pollution in the water. The gasoline gets into water, noise can cause pass through. The mammals might be confused, and and we don't know where they are, right? By having a predictable model to, if that rare event happens, if we already have the predicted model that can send out to the ships or to the port authority or to people that they're involved, they know, okay, this happens, and we actually know the marine mammal is being traveling through this, because we have some baseline data we know, and we potentially might be, that can help to maybe vessels reduce the speed, that reduce the pollution, that reduce all that. So that can maybe remove the impact on that on the mammals, and hopefully nothing happens in that respect of injuries, right? Yeah.
Thank you. And we've got one more question. So based off of kind of what we've chatted about and hearing everyone's presentations, it sounds like kind of integrating those like environmental, economic, and all that social data is crucial. And it sounds like a lot of that is already happening, which is really great. But I would love to hear a bit more about how that can improve kind of those comprehensive risk assessments for the harbor. If those are like something that's already being done, kind of like coming at it from that interdisciplinary angle, which Corey, it sounds like from your presentation that a lot of that intersectional kind of like interdisciplinary stuff is already happening. So I'd love to hear some more about that.
No, I wouldn't say that it is consistently happening. Hence the reason why I was really excited about coming to speak with you folks today, and to keep the dream alive, because I am only at its infancy stages of piecing all of these different pieces of data that I can gather together to kind of create a storyboard for port operations. And there's a whole host of different things that I could eat up all of your time to talk to you about, all the different things that we need to measure risk in to keep operations moving safely. There are some companies out there that are doing different types of projects that tackle the impact of environment by shipping. There's a company called RightShip that collects the GHG from vessels when they're alongside. But that requires all of the different shipping companies to actually participate in the program, report information, and report valid information into their program, right? And that's hard. That's hard to get everybody to participate, and then subsequently turn it into a subscription and sell it back to somebody. And so there's all kinds of different initiatives out there, but each one if somebody's tackling just one component of all the things that Clark and Samira have talked about, and some of the things I've spoken about, that's helpful, because we can take that one piece of the data that they're working towards and bring it into a whole host of other pieces of information, and then turn it into a storyline that we can really use to our benefit, and to everybody's benefit. I love the fact that Clark uses open source. That's awesome.
It does sound like kind of open source data and data sharing is the key to a lot of this, which is kind of why we're doing these challenges, is to kind of put the impetus on the importance of open source data. And it seems like a lot of scientific journals are moving towards that too, and code sharing too, which is fantastic. But if our panelists have anything else they'd like to share kind of on that topic, thinking about like open source data and integrating all those different aspects, before we wrap up, now's the time. I don't see any last questions. I see the question in our Q&A about the challenge, but we'll get to that afterwards, Tolga, don't worry. And I don't see anything else in the chat. But any final words before we wrap up the panel for our panelists?
Just maybe one thing. It's open source data. I would say in Canada, we're actually not in a great place right now in terms of making open data available, or not just available, but discoverable and available. I would say there are some efforts underway to make that better. There's one, it's known as CEUS. It's the Canadian Integrated Ocean Observation System. I recommend people check that out. You probably got it in your stuff. There's some other initiatives underway at COVE to try and do this as well. But I think, as you know, as Corey kind of said, like there aren't a lot of these big integrative data pulling from different fields happening right now, because it's actually hard to get the oceanographic data with the vessel traffic data, with the mammal data, whatever you need, and you know, bring those together for an application that requires all of them. And so right now it's a lot of like trying to figure out what the pieces are before you can even start assembling the puzzle, which is challenging. And I think also a good reason why challenges like this are a good thing.
Yeah, I guess as Clark says, that there's not a lot of information publicly available, and it's very difficult because there's different domains and different things, and pulling those data and trying to bring it in together, it's really a hiccup. It's like even like what we're trying to do right now is like creating this kind of like bringing just one certain aspects of it. Their data is not there, and we have to create that data and test it and model and train it to just for 1 segment to see what is happening, right? And I think it's a good start, you know, no matter where how the students can put the challenge through and solve it. Important it is how we start, how to start it, how do we bring it in. You know, I know, for example, talking with NOAA before, they started it like very, very, very long time ago. They have like open sources and you can tap in, but they're still not complete. There's still a lot of problem because there's not really, it's hard to get everybody in, like, you know, shipping lines and, you know, DMOs and you know, environmental field consulting and to share these kind of data. So I guess that starting thinking about it, how that can come together and putting a baseline for it, and that will help as the companies coming along to create the solution, they can put that into the system, right? If the government coming into the solution, they can put that to the system, and hopefully as they go along, it comes into one sort of data center to be able to, that's a long journey, but I'm pretty sure it can happen as we go along.
Yeah, hopefully someday we'll get there where kind of data sharing is common practice. But thank you again, Samira, Clark, and Corey for joining us this evening. It's been really interesting to hear about your perspectives kind of on rare events in the harbor and your experience with how they have impacted your job, and also the challenges that you face with these rare events. You're welcome to stay on if you'd like for the rest of the kickoff, but feel free to take off if you'd like and catch maybe a nice sunrise. I don't know. Well, up in Wolfville, we don't have a nice one, but maybe down in the city you guys do. Thank you again for joining us.
Thank you so much, Elisa. I appreciate that.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. And everyone else, we are sticking around to hear from Emily about the rules and some guidelines for the challenge.
Hey everyone, sorry, just getting my my slides up and running. So thanks so much to the speakers just now. I hope you got a lot out of it. I know I did. And it's really inspiring, I think, when you're starting on this, you know, 2-week project to have experts in the field talk about their own perspective. So I hope you enjoyed it. I do have up on the screen here an overview of the challenges. Now, I know you saw it at the beginning when Alyssa went through them, but maybe with everything that was just said fresh in your mind, you might want to review it again. I will remind you that you'll get all of this information by email, and I believe it's going to be dropped in the chat as well. So I'll just go through it really quickly as a refresher. So the challenge is, what are the impacts of a rare event on the Halifax Harbour? There are 3 streams: on the harbour, in the harbour, and around the harbour. For anyone who's been involved in Ocean of Data challenges in the past, that'll be a familiar structure for you. So on the harbour is looking at the impact of rare events on vessel traffic in the harbour. In the harbor is looking maybe more in the water itself, so at the ecosystem or the water itself. And around the harbor is a bit more of a focus on sort of the community implications of a rare event or the economic implications. So looking at things like cruise ships and events and these sorts of things. I'll leave it at that since I know we've already gone through it a little bit, and I'll move on to some of the other aspects to the event itself. So obviously this is called an Ocean of Data challenge. It's all about the data. Your submission at the end, and I'll get into submission details in a moment, your submission must include some form of open data, and it must be referenced and clearly utilized in your submission. We're providing a list of sources that you're welcome to use, but it's not an exhaustive list. If you have other sources that you find, I know Clark mentioned a lot, if you find other sources, you are welcome to use them as long as you have permission to do so. I'll go through the rules. Again, please do review the rules before you start working on your final submission, because there are some things that it's easy to miss. So similar to the data rules, competitors must own the rights or have written permission for all software demonstrated in a competition. So, you know, maybe you write it yourself, that's great. But if you're using anything else that isn't yours, you need to make sure that you have permission to do so and that you can show that clearly in your project. The goal of the submission, so what you're actually submitting, is a prototype of some kind presented in a 3-minute video. So this prototype is a bit of a broad word in this sense. It can be a tech solution, it can be a prototype in reality, it can, or a visualization, or a plan to address some of the questions outlined in the challenge streams. So there's a couple of different ways that you can approach this. Find the stream that's most interesting to you, the data that's most interesting to you, and then figure out what's the solution that you're actually offering. Competitors can work solo or in teams of up to 5 members. You're not allowed to submit projects containing confidential information. You're required to use at least one source of public data. That shouldn't be hard to do with this topic, as we were just talking about. We do have some sources that you can use. Noting the source of the data in presentation or within the infographic, visual, or slides. So in the presentation itself, in the video, we need to be able to see where you're getting the data. The competitors themselves must currently be living in Canada with an active Canadian bank account, in the hopes that you win your prize, and then you can make sure that you get the prize money at the end. And you must be a current part-time or full-time student of an academic institution in Atlantic Canada. Atlantic Canada includes New Brunswick, Nova Scotia, PEI, Newfoundland, and Labrador, or you've graduated from one of these institutions within the past 12 months. Looking at the video submissions themselves, so it's not a live presentation. You're sending a video to us. The video will present your idea to the judges. The judges are not the same people as you've met today. I believe we're announcing the judges in the next couple of days. The video can be voiceover slides, or it can be you yourself speaking, or a combination of the two, however you want to approach that. You have to upload the video online. So we prefer a private link on YouTube, but we will not be downloading an attachment or anything like that. So it must be uploaded somewhere where we can get the link. A couple logistics in order to prepare for submission. Each member of a team must fill out a Google form registration to be eligible. Each member must fill out a pre-survey sent by the Halifax Port Authority. And to qualify, teams need to fill out the team summary document and email it to DeepSense, info@deepsense.ca. The deadline for the video submission, it must be delivered by Sunday, June 23rd, just before midnight, 11:59 p.m. And that's Halifax time. All this, if you aren't absorbing this at 7:30 in the evening, all this information is going to be sent by email, so you are free to address it again then. Obviously, this is a competition, so there are prizes to be won. Projects will be judged based on presentation, so the video submission, creativity, and the prototype itself. So ranging from a tech solution, a visualization, or overall plan, whatever way you choose to present the solution to your problem. First prize is $750, and then second prize, top creative design, and judge's choice all win $500. You can have a look here at the challenge schedule. Obviously, we are right in the middle of, or maybe towards the end of the kickoff. So Monday, June 10th is the kickoff. This is the official start to the event. The deadline is June 23rd, as I just said, at 11:59. Between the 24th, so the morning after, and the 26th, that's when the judging will take place. So judges will review all of your submissions, fill in the rubric, and decide on some winners. And then on Thursday, June 27th, by 4 p.m., winners will be announced. If you're a winner, you'll be notified, and everyone will find out on social media who the winners are. So we're happy to take any questions you have about the challenge at this stage. If you're curious about anything, or you're just wondering how it works, Alyssa and I are happy to field some questions on that. I'm going to stop sharing my screen so that I can see people again. And if you can't think of questions now, but you want to think about questions later, you can always email info@deepsense.ca. I see that the links have been dropped in the chat. Are there any restrictions on previous winners competing again? No, there are not. Alyssa, correct me if I'm wrong. No, there are no, we encourage people to, if you had such a good time last time and you won, then try your luck again. I will say that it should be a different solution. If you're thinking you can double up from a previous solution, that is not the idea. And it would be unlikely that you would win in that situation, because the part of the judging criteria is creativity and innovation. So that's the only caveat to saying that you're absolutely welcome to do it again.
And Tolga, I'm just looking at your other question that you popped in the Q&A box. If the topic we want to do our project on does not have any data sets, but rather articles, would an action plan including how to gather this data suffice to qualify as an entry? The question does make sense. I'm thinking you should pursue a topic with data sets. So if you feel like you have enough time to reach out to the author and ask if they have any suggestions for open source data, or kind of think about what kind of data they used in that article to kind of come to whatever conclusion they had that you're interested in, thinking about that and what kind of data you could use that's comparable, maybe. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and if I can just add to that, I think having articles as part of your research makes perfect sense, but that can't be your only source of data. So obviously, any research you do can help you inform your solution, but articles don't qualify as data.
Yeah. Cannot find the raw data.
I think it's a little bit, maybe Tolga, it would be worth emailing us about this, because I think it depends a little bit on how it's presented. If it's just someone talking about it, that doesn't seem like, data, but if it's being presented in a raw form, it might be okay. So maybe you could run what you're thinking about using past us so that we can assess it on a case-by-case basis.
Yeah, you can send us an email with the link to the article. Yeah, sounds good. And Joy, that's what Emily was talking about earlier, what you need to submit. It'll be sent around in an email, but just to briefly go through it again, it'll be the team concept submission form, which one person on the team will submit for the entire team, and then the registration form, which everyone on the team needs to fill out. And in addition to that, the pre-survey that Halifax Port Authority is sending around. But again, all that will be in the email that you receive tomorrow.
Yeah. So there's those three sort of administrative pieces, and then the video itself is your submission. But you need all of them done in order to qualify to be judged.
Yeah, exactly.
Is there any other questions? Just checking. We answered that one.
Is there a definition for a rare event? Is it any
Excellent
any
question.
time range? There's no restriction, like it could be that hurricane that Clark mentioned like 20 years ago, or if you find data from like the 1900s that you're interested in. Rare event is kind of a loose term, but something out of the ordinary. Like Sherry was talking about, it could be something positive, like say LGP, like that is considered a rare event because it doesn't happen. It's never happened in Canada before. Hurricanes, I would also consider as a rare event because they do happen yearly, but it's not predictable when
it's not
happen.
business as usual, I think.
Exactly. Yeah. Things have to change to adapt to the hurricane.
Yeah. I think part of this challenge, we have offered a lot of sort of parameters in order to get you started, but they're almost none of them are really exhaustive lists. So even the definition of a rare event, if you think of something that you think, yeah, this is really a rare event, it's not in any of the things that they mentioned, you can check it with us, or you can use your video submission to, you know, argue that case, because that's part of, you know, that would, I would say, give you creativity points. So, you know, for all of the suggestions that we put forward within the challenge streams and things like that, do think outside the box on things, because it's a good chance to sort of stand out and convince us that, you know, maybe we didn't think about a rare event that is really interesting and has a lot of impact. So there's not a strict definition, which can sometimes be difficult, but hopefully you see it as a bit of an opportunity to be creative.
Yeah, hopefully the conversations we had with Clark and Samir and Corey can kind of help give you some ideas of where to start. And then we'll be sending around like the full challenge description again tomorrow, so you'll have those kind of concrete ideas too. Yes, I will send the email in the chat.
Any other questions? If there's anyone new?
If the video is longer than 3 minutes, do your best to keep it to 3 minutes. We typically have quite a few submissions and our judges are volunteering their time. So out of respect for them and to not put too much demand on them, do your best to keep it at 3 minutes, please.
Yeah. And I would say that it will, you know, in theory be held, you know, as part of it. So if you are able to describe your entire project and your idea within 3 minutes, I would say that reflects very well on your project. Whereas if you are into like 5 minutes or something like that, no one is going to be looking fondly on that. You know, we don't have like a point system against it necessarily, but it's not going to do you any favors.
Yeah, good way to put it. Judges will not be running models because you are just sending them a 3-minute video. So you're not sending them code or anything. You're still giving us the links for your data sources so we can take a look at them. But do not expect them to run code. They are watching your 3-minute video and then just evaluating that.
Yeah, and anything that you want to that you want to demo needs to be demoed in that 3 minutes.
Yeah, exactly.
Give it another couple minutes, I think.
Yeah.
It's going to be competitive. There's a lot of previous hackathon winners in this list.
I know. There's lots of names that I recognize. I'm happy to see folks coming back from this. So I have high expectations for
it's going to be great.
I'm sure we'll be blown out of the water like we always are.
I'm sure.
It seems like that's everything. Any further questions, just reach out to DeepSense. If you missed the email in the chat, you can also reach us on social media. We check that frequently. But good luck, everyone. And we're looking forward to seeing your submissions. Thanks again for joining us tonight.
Yeah, good luck. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.